Hi, welcome to ML Buchman's 5 Insider Factoids and their answers to questions that you readers have asked me about By Break of Day, Night Stalkers number 7. Warning, there are spoilers. So, first, the structure of the Night Stalkers was books 1 through 4 were the 4 seats of a DAP Hawk MH60M direct action penetrator. The next two books were the 2 seats of an MH6M Little Bird, which were Trisha and Claudia as pilots. And then the Chinooks were originally intended as a 5 book series because there are 5 seats. There's pilot, co-pilot, 2 loadmasters who are also side gunners, and then and you can actually see one of them peeking out right here. And then there's a guy who sits at the back and he deals with the ramp. He also has a ramp gun. So it was intended that way, but I was on the process of falling out with my publisher. So I ended up uh, trying to wrap all of the Chinook into the one book, which didn't work. So I had to throw that out. And then you'll see in the last slide of this, the last question, what I did to resolve those 5 seats that I had in my writer head, and so I had to do, of course. Uh, but this is the one book that was in the main series that was part of the Chinook. The reason I couldn't continue it on my own is something I'll get to in the next video when I talk about the 5E and book number 8. So I had the pilot, just Captain Justin Roberts, and I wanted to keep life interesting. And so I was looking to do something outside the helicopter. And for this first book, I ended up choosing drones, also called uh, unmanned aerial vehicles or remotely piloted aircraft. This is before they all went autonomous, as they're doing more and more now. But these are the two that I landed on. The one in the upper right, I was actually came reasonably close to getting a job working for them, and then Boeing took over the company. It was a company called In Situ in just outside of Portland, Oregon, just over the Washington border. And they built this cute little drone here in the upper right that could be launched off a little ramp, and it's caught on a string, and it was it carries like 3 kilos of gear, but it can stay up there for a day looking or picking up cell transmission or camera. So it was one of the first really light, really useful military drones. You'll also see this drone in heavy use in my Firehawk series, where it has a very prevalent role. It's the same bird. On the other side are these bigger drones, the Reaper and all of its relatives, and they're much more intense aircraft, and they require 2 pilots to run them instead of somebody with a little pair of joysticks or a little control center. Uh, the in situ one on the upper right actually required a control console, but one person could fly it easily. The the big one on the left requires 2 people, and they actually live in something called the coffin, which is a white painted uh, metal shipping container, and they put the whole set of equipment in there, the guidance, the storage of the spare bird, the whole, and the 2 pilot seats and their control consoles. So this gave me something to make Cara Moretti be very different. She's separated from Justin Roberts, so they have this kind of remote romance going on, which created its own tension. And I loved playing with that. Then I threw into the mix this group that I'd heard of called the Activity. So Special Operations Command has uh, 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 groups, depending on who you talk to, that answer to them at tier one. Basically, they're three plus the activity. So they're SEAL Team 6, which isn't actually SEAL Team. It's its own thing called Dev Group, the development group. Uh, the next one is Delta Force, which is also, they call themselves the unit. And the third one, almost nothing is known about. They're so bloody quiet. The 24th Special Tactical Squadron from the Air Force. Notice that's Navy, Army, Air Force. So it's the three big branches giving their teams to SOCOM. And the 24th STS is, just as a side note, they're really interesting. They're the combat air controllers. So these are the guys that parachute in with a Delta team or a DevGru team or infiltrate however they get there, way behind enemy lines, and oversee the capture of an airport. So they can sit there and run full on landing field operations with a couple radios and targeting of uh, munitions. So if you're a forward fire team trying to take out a hostile enemy, there may be a 24th STS guy in there, and he's doing everything range finding, all that, to get the correct targeted by the jets up above. And also when they take over an airfield, there's a huge amount of traffic that happens very fast because they want to fortify it and stock it and get the personnel in and get a safe perimeter on what's actually a very large object. Uh, and it's done by these guys from the 24th STS. So these three teams need very special intelligence. And they report only to SOCOM. The Night Stalkers actually, some people argue they should be tier one, but they also move conventional forces like the 75th Rangers. And the 75th Rangers like to think, well, we're tier one. They aren't. They're aspirant because a lot of the Night Stalkers or a lot of the, Delta Force are recruited from the 75th Rangers. But it's really these three guys, but they need very specialized intelligence. So there's this little group which has had many, many names. It changes like every year or two. And it finally has been tagged mostly as the Activity or the Army of Northern Virginia because they're based in Fort Belvoir in Northern Virginia. And their job is to get the information that these highly specialized action teams need to go in and act and do it safely. So they can even tell you like floor plans of buildings or where the tunnels through buildings go, or uh, they'll they'll tell you what the finish is on the floor if it's relevant to an action. And they're doing this in a lot of very strange places. And a lot of it they're doing by going out there themselves and looking. So they end up being pretty high quality fighters. And some of them are recruited from Delta and DevGru and the 24th STS, but they're also about knowledge sharing. So they're pulling in knowledge from a lot of other divisions and they're about sharing the intelligence rather than compartmentalizing. It's not the Army intelligence group, it's the SOCOM intelligence group. So I'm trying to research as much as I can about them. They're very quiet, obviously. And so I have my hard drive and I'm reading PDFs about them and conspiracy theories about them and what little bits in Wikipedia and I'm trying to see what it physically looks like because I try to get my settings as real as I can. So I've got Google Maps running and I'm looking at the layout of Fort Belvoir. I figure out which is their building, which is not easy to do. And so I'm looking at what the entrances look like. Are they glass doors? Are they steel doors? What little I can tell from these diagrams. And suddenly the hard drive on my computer just winds up, just, like panic kind of level. and it just sits, and my whole computer just slows way down as this hard drive is just doing something frantically. And I'm looking, and I used to be a computer tech, so I'm looking at, what's making all this demand? There's nothing showing up, but something is really, really searching my drive. A reboot didn't stop it. As soon as it's back up, something's looking at it, and then it goes away, and it just stops. It's like, okay. And so I keep working, and a couple days later, I'm kind of back in the same place, trying to see different aspects of the area, and I've got my references open, and suddenly the hard drive spins up again. And so this time I just waited, and like 5 minutes later, it suddenly went quiet. And my guess is that I tripped some computer at the activity, and it went, "What the hell?" and clamped onto my hard drive to see what it was, and went, "Oh, a writer. Geez," and shut down. So that's my experience with the activity. The weird thing is, I may have actually met one. It was a very weird set of circumstances. Uh, I was at a writers' conference, and there was a special day trip to the SEAL base at Coronado. And a group of us writers afterward were taken to a classic SEAL bar, and we're chatting away. And this woman next to me said, "Yeah, I used to do field intel and, this and that." And she was kind of obscure about it. But I'd been researching the activity right those prior couple weeks, and it was like, oh my God, I know what she is or was. She's, had retired, had, and the other people at our table were asking a lot of questions about, because I'd mentioned uh, field intel and how I'd been researching it. So they're asking questions because we're all military romantic suspense writers at that point. And I looked over at this woman, and she looked at me, and she's just absolutely flat face, absolutely emotionless. And I said, "Okay, I'll tell you folks what I know, and she won't tell me a thing about whether I'm right or wrong." And I proceeded to lay out the activity, and she just sat there with this very slight smile, like, who knows how badly I was screwing up reality. But um, we stayed in touch for a while, and she was really pleasant. She said, yeah, I'm writing something completely different because I don't want to trip on my security clearance. That was the thing that had tripped me originally. So anyway, I may have actually met an activity operative. I don't know. So again, family at the core of the story. And I wanted to look at two very different types of families, but very close families. Just as Trisha and Bill were, she's in a dysfunctional family. He's in one with a single mom whose father died in the military. Um, so I wanted to look at two good, happy, incredibly different families. So I went to Italian Brooklyn, which I know reasonably well. My sister lives in that area. And uh, Texan royalty, the top breeders. And I had to really research that a lot because it's not something deep in my experience. But it was really fun to set up that contrast and see how they're reacting differently to their parents and how it made them different, but that family connection also made them the same and brought them together. And so that was for me sort of the important core of the book was how those different types of family thought interacted and how they came together. And I just I just loved it. Um, and the what spun off from this is all of the connections. There are a ton of connections from By Break of Day out to a ton of different books and stories. So there's one point where Justin buys Kara a pair of cowboy boots in a New Jersey, Paramus, New Jersey strip mall. This place really exists. And I ended up writing this helper person, and she was just charming. She was just fun. And I don't think she even had a name in the book. But anyway, Ashley became a lookout at the Summer of Fire and Heart, which is one of the short stories in the Complete Fire Lookouts. So she went off that way. And then the way I solved the other four seats of the Chinook were I had Danny and Carmen get together in Since the First Day. The crew chief number two, I filled with a Brit. He was never really a prominent character in By Break of Day. So I had a Brit fill in, and he became Sergeant George and the Dragoon, which is also a Night Stalker's 5e story. The thing about that one is it links to the last Delta Force story. So the opening of Delta Force number one is also occurring at the same time as Sergeant George and the Dragoon. So the threads kept expanding. And there are various missions where the different, like Delta Force ends up needing a Chinook. And they end up on Justin Roberts' ship, and they end up meeting Danny or Carmen or so on. And then the ramp gunner actually got his own novel. Uh, for some reason, I just had such a clear picture of him in my head when I wrote it that Drake Roman became the hero of Night Stalker's number 10, Target of Mine. And again, to take him out of the, I mean, the ramp gunner, what are you going to do for tension for a ramp gunner? I had him assigned out on a special mission. And he's barely on the helicopter, but he brings this whole set of skills and training and attitude and uh, ends up falling in love with a SEAL, the first woman of DevGru of SEAL Team 6. So there, and there are more and more connections hiding deep in these books that I didn't really plan at first. They just came out that way. Anyway, that's a quick summary of By Break of Day. Please visit my website, mlbuchman.com. There's all kinds of fun stuff out there, bonus scenes, recipes from the books, maps, more of these videos. So please come visit the site. Thanks for watching.